You here this evening, and thank the elders of Chalcedon Presbyterian Church for allowing me to use the facility. This is the second in the series of the parent education seminars we're doing on different topics. And we're making the tapes so that we have different topics available to parents so that they can learn the neurodevelopmental approach to different problems that we deal with children. Like I said, my name is Kay Ness. I'm a certified neurodevelopmentalist with ICANN, which is International Christian Association of Neurodevelopmentalists. And you'll say, what is a neurodevelopmentalist? A neurodevelopmentalist is somebody that has interned with a private organization to learn to work with individuals in a specific way. It's based on two major principles. The first principle is that the brain develops in a predictable, hierarchical fashion, stepwise fashion. And when something's wrong with function, we can go back and find where the error took place, do stimulation at that point to help the person catch up and function. So we can evaluate exactly where the individual is functioning with a hierarchical analysis of vision, tactility, and auditory function. The other major principle of the neurodevelopmental approach to anything is that the brain is plastic. Plastic means changeable, formable. And the fact is that this isn't even a question. All the research today confirms the fact that neuroplasticity is a fact, that, that with specific stimulation we change the function, the structure, and the chemistry of the brain. Now, if you look at what a brain looks like, a brain is a bunch of neurons, nerve cells. And they're sitting there when the baby's born. And that accounts for like 3% of the mass of the adult brain, the brain cells themselves. The rest of the mass of the brain is interconnections between those neurons, the synapses. The synapses are formed from one brain cell to another by stimulation. So that you can see that 97% of the function of the brain is determined by stimulation, and 3% is determined by genetics. So genetics really plays a very small role with respect to where our children function. So it actually changes the whole role of the parent in every area of life when you realize that the stimulation that the child gets, that we provide, determines ultimately where our children are going to function, whether they have problems or whether they do not, and they're considered normal. So this particular seminar is about autism, and I've dealt with many, many children with autism, from a very low functioning to very high functioning, with all kinds of issues. So I hope you understand that the concept of neuroplasticity, the fact that with specific stimulation, what we have that individual do, how we impact the central nervous system of that child or adult, actually changes the brain. Unfortunately, the rest of the world that labels children looks at a disease model as a fixed brain model. If you have a child that's been labeled with autism or on the autistic spectrum, you take a child in who's acting a little weird or not doing something right, and then they evaluate the child. And they say, oh, your child has autism, PDD, you know, whatever they want to label a child, Asperger's syndrome, ADHD. That's why they're doing these things. You say, well, okay. So the label becomes the reality and the expectation for the child. And most of the time, labels are very limiting and harmful to children, because a child with autism isn't expected to change. A child with autism is expected to always have autism, is expected to always have trouble with communication, with language, with relating to people, with taking care of themselves. I have a zillion stories of parents that had their children evaluated when they're 2, 3, 4, whenever, and were told their children were autistic, and immediately the pediatricians and everybody around the person will say, don't get into chasing down those vitamins and things. These children's brains are different. You ought to see them on a CAT scan. You will never change. They'll always be this way. In other words, they just devastate these parents with the fact that there's no hope. But the fact is, that's crazy. There's always hope because the whole system is changeable, extremely plastic, especially in young children. I saw a special on PBS, I think it was, recently, that London cab drivers actually changed the structure of their brains by learning the map of London. They have something, it takes 2 years to become a London cab driver. And they have to go out and walk the streets of London and get a perfect map in their head and pass this big test. It's called the knowledge of where everything is in London before they can be licensed to be a cab driver in London. And when they tested the brains, they scanned the brains of these people before and after they learned the knowledge. And the brains of these adults changed. They got a lot larger in the specific area with respect to visual and spatial information. So we can do that just with a simple learning the map of London. Of course we can impact the brains of our children. And if our children are having problems and not functioning properly, of course we can impact that system with the right stimulation. So the question isn't, can we help our children change? The question is, number one, what do we need to do to help them change? What do we need to do to help them achieve normal or superior function? What's actually going on? And if there's some kind of damage to the system, is it progressive? Is it metabolic? Is something continuing to go on? What do we need to do to stabilize that? Now, with children with autism, or the A label, I always say, there's almost always metabolic issues going on, things that are assaulting their sensory system. So that's an area we're going to get into later to look at. So I hope you understand that neuroplasticity is our great hope. It is the way the Lord designed the brain. And there is no doubt that it exists. A newborn baby is designed to perfectly adapt to the environment, the language, everything, the culture, the syntax, everything of that culture. They're little sponges. They grow like crazy. They do all these neural connections, and they learn to adapt to that. So the human brain is designed by God to change and adapt according to the environment it's in. And it is also designed to change and adapt according to any damage done to it, so that we know that we can help children improve function if they've been labeled. There's just no doubt about it. And I work with a full range of children, from very brain injured children to gifted children, to babies to adults. And in the last 10 years, there's been a huge increase in the number of children called autistic. A huge increase. It used to be we very seldom see children with autism. And today, everybody knows somebody with a child with autism. So it's not just labeling, but the fact is something's going on with our kids. All right, so you got that? Neuroplasticity is our hope, and there's no doubt about it. It's confirmed in all the research. It's everything that, it's everything that's going on. We have children that were born blind that can see now. They're supposed to be called cortically blind. With the right stimulation, they actually learn to see. We have children that are brain injured and can't walk. With the right stimulation, they start to feel their legs, and they can start to creep crawl, and sometimes they learn to walk. And we don't have all the answers. We don't have all the wisdom. There's some kids that don't recover. But we know a lot. We know a lot. And we certainly don't have to leave kids out there with the expectation of the label that they've received. We don't have to leave them there, whether it's bipolar, whether it's autism, whether it's ODD, that's one of my favorites. But with learning disabilities, with brain injuries, we don't have to leave the kids there. Is that we can do a lot to impact the system. So, all right. So y'all here have children that have been labeled on the autistic spectrum. So what is autism? What is the autistic spectrum? It's a very confusing label because usually it involves having trouble with language, having trouble with social skills, having trouble relating to their environment. They do odd, repetitive things and whatever. Usually the language delay is one of the first areas in which parents see a kid and start to have their hearing test. I don't know. It's usually one of the first things they do. But I've seen children come to the autism label from many, many different areas. I've seen children born with what they call autism. I've seen children regress from a vaccine, a virus, a brain injury of some type. I've seen children that are autistic because they're born prematurely and they have all these issues. I've seen children come to me with the autism label that have been on antibiotics for 7 years and their system is so out of whack. Many, many roads to coming to this label. So that should tell you a kid that acts weird, that it has what they call autism, it doesn't come at it from the same cause. The children come to these problems from different causes. So we need to look at what is the underlying cause of these things and what can we do to help the children recover a damaged system. All right, so autism, no matter how you label the child, we know it's not fixed, it's something we can do something about. You know, it comes at it from many different labels. Even calling a child autistic isn't even that helpful. It kind of gives you an idea of somewhere to start, but it doesn't really tell you what to do. And certainly the professionals that come to you and say, we know what's wrong with your child is autistic, and that becomes the expectation for your child, it's almost a death sentence because your child has no future with that label. And it's wrong. It's wrong to leave children that way. That's why I'm such a fanatic about this stuff. But anyway, what we need to do is give parents and children hope of what they can do and very specific things, and it's not that hard. It's really not that hard. So, back, excuse me, back in, when was this? Back in 74. Are any of y'all familiar with this book? Carl Delicato wrote the book, The Autistic Child, The Ultimate Stranger. It's an excellent book. He was one of the original neurodevelopmental group guys that got together to look at how we can take advantage of neuroplasticity and what's necessary and sufficient for normal human function. Looks kind of like a chihuahua. Carl Delicato is brilliant. This is really funny if you read it. Carl Delicato was the first person, well, back in the old days, children were autistic because their mothers were refrigerator mothers, right? You didn't love your child, you didn't show them affection, so they acted weird, right? So he challenged that actual thing. He was working with a group of guys that were working with brain-injured children and making some remarkable progress at helping the kids recover function, the brain-injured kids. So Carl Delicato was given the assignment of working with children with behavior issues. And the children with the strangest behavior issues were autistic children. So he decided he was going to study autistic children. But he was the first one, this is a very funny read, but he was the first one to put together the sensory dysfunction and autism. The reason for the behavior of children with autism was sensory dysfunction. So Carl Delicato was the first one to do that in the early 70s. And you can't, this book is out of print, you have to buy it used, but it's a great read. It's a very, very good read.